Chinese citizens took to the street to demand democracy and say no to dictatorship. It seems Xi Jinping didn't learn his lesson because he's talking about enacting martial law again. Here are the details. I hear from multiple channels how Beijing has increased internal control and surveillance, fearing that the de facto trade blockage will cause internal turmoil. Perhaps it's too early for that, but the pressure is already felt. Yes, I can confirm, they are preparing for an uptick in unrest, possibly even enacting martial law if needed. Now, the question rises, why is Xi Jinping freaking out again? Why does CCP feel the need to clamp down on its own citizens? Well, that has to do with this trade war and how badly the Chinese economy is already suffering. Local factories are shutting down, Chinese citizens are losing their livelihood, and on top of that, Chinese allies are realizing that they were getting the short end of the stick when they were trading with China. Let's start with the local factories.
They say I'm spreading rumors. Let me show you. The factory is on break, waiting for further notice. I need to find temporary workers. This is the reality.
Today, I met with a client in the textile export business. The raw materials had just arrived in the morning, and production was about to start. But by noon, they were hit with news of a 104% tariff. As a result, all the orders were canceled, and the factory immediately announced a shutdown. Sure, we also imposed an 84% tariff on the US, and that did boost morale, right? But after the slogans fade, has anyone really thought about what comes next? The most immediate impact is that many export-focused factories will have to cut production, lay off workers, and a lot of people could lose their jobs.
These people who are losing their jobs are realizing that their government is making a huge mistake.
Hey everyone. So, this huge collapse of China that's happening. Now, these are calms that I've been telling you this event was going to happen. I was talking about this 3 years ago. Even long before that, I've been telling you that behind the scenes, Xi, Modi, Russia, Putin, Trump, they're all working together, even though it doesn't seem like it. I've been telling you, I've been giving you the calms that they're going to have a controlled collapse of China. And Xi is going to sacrifice himself to bring down a huge economic collapse. He's actually doing this. It has to do with his lineage, his family, his father, the family through the CCP, the people who created the CCP. He's been wanting to do this throughout his whole life to come into power. No matter the stuff that you read about Xi, what you hear in mainstream media, the real story behind him is that he came into power for revenge to break apart the CCP. And I've been giving, a lot of comms. I gave a huge article, and I'll end up doing a story on Xi soon. But I've been telling you there's an alliance, and inside of this alliance is to break apart the CCP, because the CCP is actually created by the elites, the Rothschilds, and their early banking systems. And this all goes back to the same thing, the Jesuits, the Vatican Treasury, the Rothschilds. This goes back over 160 years ago into China, how they created the CCP, and then the drug trade and all this stuff we've been talking about, Hong Kong. But Xi, behind the scenes, he wants to collapse his country. And I was the first person to really tell you that China's going to fall apart, that this is planned. Now you're actually seeing what Trump is doing, even in these first months coming back into power. He's creating a huge, gigantic collapse inside of China. The reason why that's important is because the globalists are siphoning money from there. The CIA operation that funds wars, that funds the drug trade, that funds pharmaceutical industries, that funds all the money laundering systems through Hong Kong, through all of these different provinces that the CCP controls. The deep state, the Mossad, MI6, UK, Israel, the United States, they're stealing money from there, and they're stealing a lot of money that's into the trillions that's been going on for a long time. Now that's funding the wars, the human trafficking, that's funding the genocide that's been going on inside of China underneath the CCP for a long time. So now you're watching this collapse actually happen. Now China's in a huge real estate bubble. People are pulling money. People are really upset. People lost so much money inside the stock market within the past week. Now Trump has raised the tariffs, and this thing is massive. There's people that aren't even producing food for the world. You know, they make chips, they make all these kind of different foods that they distribute to all the different countries through Malaysia, through the world. All these different kind of candies, all these different kind of products, plastics. China delivers a lot of resources through the world. Now that's in huge collapse. And all these regions through China, everybody's upset because there's no work. The factories are closing down. The real estate, there's a huge, gigantic bubble. There's a massive inflation that's now hitting, and people aren't going to work. And the shipping is going down, and people don't know what to do at the shipping ports because everything is backed up, everything that's supposed to go into the United States. And it's really affecting their productivity. And all of this is going into a global crisis. Now the wires, what's really happening, the wires that's running through DC into Europe, when I'm talking about the wires, this is what's really happening behind the scenes, behind the big gigantic banks, the wires of the banking system is, there's huge panic that something's going to happen. Now we're talking about the Black Swan event. We're talking about this that everybody's been talking about. General Flynn, we've been warning about this event. This Black Swan event has already begun in the United States slowly. You know, when Biden was in office and the inflation, and they were hiding all the Wall Street numbers, it was all fake. Everything was fake that was coming out of the financial system of the United States. It was in a huge, huge collapse. Now Trump is already rebuilding it. He's building it really, really, really quickly. But on the opposite end, now these countries are going to fall apart like I was talking about. And it's a controlled collapse that's going to happen in China. But when I'm talking about a controlled collapse, we're talking about an alliance behind the scene. When we talk about these countries, from India to Russia to the United States, there's an alliance. When China collapses, they're going to be there to help. Now everybody's going to have to make a huge agreement that's going to come in the future, you know, to stabilize the world economy, to stabilize the world resources, to help China out, to help rebuild China. And I've been telling you for a long time, the huge plan is to break China into these small little countries, but they're still going to be united together almost like a union. But all these countries will control their own GDP, and they'll have their own small militaries, and they want to break them apart. And I'm telling you, a lot of provinces have already been wanting to do this. But now the students inside of China, all the universities, they're planning protests. And this is going to keep on growing, this huge, gigantic wave. Now that wave from China has tens of thousands of companies, corporations inside of Europe, inside of Germany, inside of Berlin, Munich, all the way into Vienna, into Italy, all the way into Africa, into the United States. They have a lot of corporations. So now they don't have the resources, you know, to keep pushing these operations, and they want to start pulling money from the stock, and that's already happening. So all of the subsidiary companies, subsidiary investors from different countries that are Chinese, they're pulling their money. And everybody's hiding this right now. The United States stock market, the European stock market, the Chinese stock market. Everybody is scared because they're hoping that this can stabilize quickly and they don't have to show the real, what the real figures are in all of the countries that are dealing with China. How much money people are losing inside the United States that's invested with China. The same thing inside of Europe, people that are invested with China and the Chinese investments. Everything's in a huge, gigantic, massive collapse. Now people are taken to the streets. People are planning these huge, gigantic protests. They're talking about martial law that's going to be coming in. So this event is powerful and it's going to keep on growing. So the wires is there's going to be a huge, gigantic collapse. And we're talking about this for a long time. But the United States will be okay, but there's going to be a small collapse that's going to follow. It's going to trigger everything. So this is what everybody's kind of scared of a little bit inside the banking systems, inside these huge hedge funds all over the world. They're absolutely afraid of this because they're going to lose trillions of dollars through this in the market. And everybody's really, really scared of this. So this is what the wires is reporting from the banking systems. This is the intel that I'm getting. So this is actually really, really huge. So there's two events that's coming. There's a financial event that's coming that's going to hit the world. And then the next event that's going to come is a huge standoff, like that near nuclear standoff, a new near nuclear war standoff that's going to come. But we're also looking at other things that's happening. But you have to understand that these are military operations. This is what number 17, the 17 of the letter alphabet was talking about. Pain. This is what I've been talking about for a long time, that this is going to happen. This is the pain moment. You're not going to really feel it completely inside the United States, but we're going to feel it in different countries. That's going to hit really hard. Inside of Europe, it's going to hit. And then inside of Malaysia, it's really going to hit. These are military operations that's stopping the deep state that controls the Chinese economy with the CCP. It controls the world drug trade, the world weapon trade. It controls the human trafficking trade. There's a huge collapse that Trump is working on, the alliance is working on. So this is what's really behind the scenes that we've been talking about for a long time, that Trump is going to initiate this with the white hats. The deep state was trying to create a collapse, to create war, to create famine, to kill billions of people. The white hats have a plan to collapse. These are game theory operations that's been war gamed. This has been war gamed so many times by the United States and then collective intelligence from inside of Europe, UK, Canada, the United States, even with Russia, even with India. They war gamed this so many times of what's going to happen when they're going to break China apart, when they're going to stop all of this money that's being stolen, that's supporting the deep state. And so this has already been war gamed, what's going to happen. And the deep state is in panic because they're going to lose all their support in these countries. They're going to lose their full financial system in these countries. Now, behind the scenes, Trump, the alliance, have a plan to rebuild China after the collapse, to help all of the, different provinces. That's why Musk was already meeting with the financial ministries over in China underneath Xi. That's why Xi, when he came to the United States, he was meeting with certain generals, certain people that's inside of the USSF. He was meeting with Trump over the internet. He was meeting with Musk again, and they were doing a lot of confirmation to initiate a lot of these operations. Now we're going to get into a little more difficult stuff. The reason why China can't initiate a war, I keep telling you, the United States has the most powerful weapons, the most powerful technology that's behind Trump. Now this is all going to be confirmed by the government. as I'm making this video, it's going to be coming out soon that the government has advanced technology and it's going to be connected to USSF. The USSF has technology behind the scenes to use satellites to shut down grids, to even create energy, to create electricity in different countries using Tesla energy. With that Tesla energy, I keep telling you, this Tesla energy is connected to wormholes. These wormholes are connected to stuff that you see like with the MH370. These wormholes can transport troops, you can transport the military, but not only that, but you can also make things disappear in different countries. It's a teleportation device. Now that's why I was telling you, in 2016 when Trump became the president of the United States, he signed secret orders, and underneath those secret orders with the military used these operations with the people who created USSF, the United States Air Force, intelligence, the White Hats. They were in control of this very advanced technology that creates wormholes. And they went to the Vatican. Underneath the Vatican, they went to the treasury, and then they went also to the Switzerland treasury, and they stole all the gold. They stole all the wealth of the elites, which were all these precious stones, all of these rubies, all of these silver bars. There was so much other collectible stuff that was stored underneath the Vatican, that was stored over in the mountains over in Switzerland in certain areas. And that was the wealth of the deep state that included all the richest families throughout Europe, the Rothschilds, their banking systems, including a lot of what the Majesty from the UK had, they also stored it over in Switzerland. So a lot of this wealth, this gold, it was near $2 quintillion that Trump took. Now that's what bankrupted him. That's why the Vatican was asking for money in 2018, because they became broke. And that's why the Rothschilds started storing all their money deeper inside the mountains, and it's being protected by military all the time. And this was actually the elite's wealth. These were the very powerful families, like 2,000 powerful families, their wealth that is part of the globalists, part of the Davos group, part of the old Third Reich families. Trump took that money through these operations with the Air Force, who later became the United States Space Force. And that Space Force has these powerful, powerful technologies that can create wormholes, and he can make things disappear. So this same technology Trump is using in China already. They've already used it the past 3 years. They took a bunch of military warheads. They took a lot of stuff out from China. Now China doesn't have the real technology to create a full war, but they're going to stage it with the White Hats. People are going to try to stage a nuclear war that's going to go off in the world. It's just going to be a nuclear standoff. It's the scare event that's going to happen. This is slowly coming, whether it's through Iran, the Middle East, but China's going to be backing it, whether it's through Russia, the United States. This is going to be staged. I keep telling you about this event that's going to happen, but it's a scare event. And then at the same time, inside the United States, the collapse that's going to happen, a small collapse that's still going to happen, that's financial. So all of these deep state operations that's been running with the CCP for a long time, human trafficking, drug trade, the money laundering operations through Hong Kong, all of these deep state operations of creating the virus through China, through Wuhan, that's connected over to the Democratic Party in the United States, and then also connected to Republican presidents, ex-presidents. All of this is inside a control collapse. At the same time, all that fentanyl, all those Chinese soldiers that went over to Mexico, that went to the border, and all the drug trade that went that way, that's been controlling a large part of the operations with the cartels, and then a lot of leaders inside of the government inside of Mexico. Trump is going to collapse that. Right now, behind the scenes, Trump is talking with the Mexican military, the top commanders. He's actually talking behind the scenes with the president that's in charge right now over in Mexico, the Jewish lady. And there's a lot of arrests that's already happening with cartels. There's a lot of arrests that's already happening with a lot of people that's part of the deep state, these government officials in all different regions. There's a huge war that's already kicking off like a civil conflict inside of Mexico, but you're not seeing it on the news. At the same time, Trump reaching out to the leaders over in Mexico, even though she's Jewish, even though she was placed by the World Economic Forum and the globalist operations, she's going to flip. And what she's going to try to do, she's going to try to work with Trump. Now, what they're planning to do, this is the wires that I'm getting from the military, is they want to make an example out of Vicente Fox, the old president that was challenging Trump, that was talking bad about Trump, the old guy that he didn't want the border wall built because he was working with cartels. They're going to expose that he was working with the cartels directly. The fundings, the banks was going through him, and he was working with the cartels, and they were working with CCP, bringing in the drug trade, the fentanyl, the human trafficking, and then bringing soldiers into the United States. And Vicente Fox was allowing this. So there's huge plans that's in the talks right now that Trump wants to have Vicente Fox be arrested either this year or next year, and they want to make a huge example of him to restructure Mexico, all the corruption. There's a lot of stuff that's happening in Mexico with the military right now. There's a lot of stuff happening with a war that's kicking off between the cartels. So what's really been happening these past years since 2016 is the world has to wake up. The military operations, the alliance, is ensuring there's a great awakening movement that's happening. At the same time, they have to get a large support of the military to flip over, and that's what's been happening in the United States the past 7 and 8 years. A lot of the military has been flipping over to Trump's side. Now this is also happening throughout the world. A lot of military are flipping over to conservative to see what the deep state was doing working with the pandemic. These military operations was so vital to get a lot of these different militaries to flip sides against the deep state, to create a huge conservative movement through Europe, through Canada, through all of these different countries, and to bring exposure that there is a deep state, there is a corrupt system that is money laundering, that is running a corruption ring that was part of the pandemic, these operations. And then a lot of other operations from corruptions of censorship, stolen elections, just to mass corruption in all of these countries are being exposed on a high level to let people know that there is a deep state in all of these countries. Really been the big objective of these military operations by the alliance, by Trump. They couldn't just hurry up and just save the world. People wouldn't have understood what was happening. Everything had to come in stages. Now this technology that's going to be released, it's also part of these stages. So what the wires are indicating is that inside of Europe, there's a huge collapse, and the elites, the banking systems are pulling money into preparing for this Black Swan event that's going to hit. Also in China, they're pulling money from all the countries. So there's huge confusion about everybody taking money out of the investments, out of corporations. The stock market is inside of free fall, but you can't see it because everything that you see, the fake numbers, the false numbers, that's being controlled by the deep state. So I'm telling you a lot of stuff that happened with technology of how Trump took almost $1 quintillion of the deep state money that started a financial collapse. And as that collapse happened, as all that money was stolen secretly by the military, this is when the deep state released the virus. So the pandemic, the virus, all of this was already planned, but they pushed it a little bit earlier to release the pandemic and the virus. It was not supposed to be released until like 2022, 2023, and the pandemic's supposed to be hitting until 2025, 2026. Those were the time of the pandemic into 2030. But the military operations made them push their operations faster because they made a lot of mistakes in that time, and their financial system couldn't handle what was happening. And insurance companies around the world, they went bust, they went bankrupt. Banks closed all the way around the world. The euro, the United States money, everything began to fall. But those were military operations to start the effect of bringing down the deep state money. Now you're watching these operations of the CCP falling, where Mossad, the Vatican, Switzerland, the globalists are hiding their money over in Hong Kong, and they're controlling the CCP, and they're stealing all the people's money over in Hong Kong and keeping that communist regime going and creating a huge human slavery system that's there. Now that's going to start to break apart, and you're actually watching that happen. Now with these operations, you see that Trump is going after Mexico. Along the border, Tom Homan is going to expose operations that's connected to a cartel networks that's connected over to, it's going to be connected to leaders of the DNC. It's going to be connected to government officials. Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, Tom Homan, they're already moving a lot of operations, indictments to hold a lot of people accountable. But the real truth is, behind the scenes, this super technology that I keep telling you, this intelligence is a living intelligence computer. These UAPs, the real UAPs, are actually living beings, but they don't look like us, but they're spirits, and they're living spirits. So this technology that Trump has, I keep telling you, it's a living spirit, it's a living energy, and that technology is helping Trump. Now that super technology, it's connected over to what Trump is calling the super AI system, the Stargate system. But that's just a cover story. He just wants you to think it's an AI system that they developed that's really strong. He's not telling you the full truth of what this system really is. But it doesn't really matter. What matters is Trump, the military, with this powerful Stargate system, they're giving information to China. They're helping them to overthrow the CCP, and they're going to create a new China. The provinces are going to break apart. There's giving information over to the White Hats over in Europe. They're giving them very important information that's going to restructure their systems, their corrupt systems. It's going to expose their systems. They're also going to have a revolution inside of France, Germany, of what's going to happen in 2 years. They're 2 years behind the United States. At the same time, Trump is using this technology. Musk is using this technology. USSF, the United States Air Force Intelligence, is using this technology. And they know that the United Nations, they know the corruption of NATO, the globalists are the one that's working with CCP. They're running operations through Mexico. They're running the fentanyl trade. They're working with the cartels down in Colombia, South America, Middle America. And they're running all of these different operations. And these operations created all of these immigrants that came into the United States. And where we're at this point, to where there could be a huge, gigantic civil unrest, a civil conflict that the deep state is trying to brew. This deep state is trying to create. The Democratic Party with rhinos are trying to kick off a war inside the United States, and this is what they're really trying to do. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening behind the scenes with Trump, with the military, the alliance. They have plans. They're helping other countries to expose the corruption. Trump has taken down the full corruption around the world, and he's working with Modi, he's working with Putin, he's working with Mohammed bin Salman. Mohammed bin Salman, he's more wealthier than Musk. His family is more wealthier than Musk. And Mohammed bin Salman's subsidiary companies, his subsidiary investors that move his money, they control large parts of social media. They control large parts of certain operations, security operations inside the internet, inside of the Middle East. And I told you that's connected over to Admiral Rogers and operations. So you're watching a huge, gigantic takedown of the world deep state. And you've been inside of this powerful operations since 2016, with Trump being in power, and then the 17th letter of the alphabet helped kicking off the Great Awakening operations. And then Trump lost the election, which he didn't lose. I keep telling you, that was given to Biden. Those were military operations, because that was going to expose a setup for the military coup. And the deep state, the Democratic Party's ex-presidents, didn't know that they were being set up. The White Hats let them initiate the coup to go ahead and use all of these different intelligence agencies, the banks, the systems, everything connected to social media, intelligence. There was a lot of stuff that went into this coup, including working with the globalists to bring in all the immigrants into the United States, all the Chinese soldiers. There's a lot of stuff that's happening. So in this moment of this Black Swan event that's happened in China, there's also something that's happening inside the United States. Last year, people, the senators, people in Congress, they were given these phones, emergency phones, in case something happened, a mass casualty event. Now they're testing those phones at this moment. Some tests went out this week. There are military operations behind the scenes inside of Washington, D.C., to where they're planning to initiate continuity of government. So there's a lot of operations that are getting ready to kick off, and we're not out of this safe zone yet. The deep state can still initiate earthquakes. They can still initiate a civil war. They can still initiate regular bombs, regular weapons, regular missile systems inside the United States to go off in cities, because they want to create confusion. At the same time, inside of China, they also want to create a huge, gigantic, something like a 9/11 event inside of China, and they want to blame the United States. The deep state wants to do that in China. So we're not out of this yet, as we have China going into their Black Swan event. The United States can get hit with a small financial part that's going to hit the markets really hard. Europe's going to be hit really hard, and then other countries are really going to feel the effect. So this is what I'm hearing behind the wires. But what's more important about this is that we're going to start talking about these operations that's connected to 17, the 17th letter of the alphabet, the technology of what's going to happen. This is the golden technology. Now it's going to start to come out. As I had finished this video, it actually came out now. So I had to kind of republish everything, put it together, because now you hear about it. Everybody's talking about the United States government is in possession of technology that can control space and time. This is connected to what I was talking about, teleportation. Do you think it's coincidence that I was telling you about all of these operations before. I was preparing you for a certain reason for all of these operations that's going to unfold. Disclosure projects I was telling you about. Very intelligent operations connected to plasma energy, infinite energy. I was talking about these quantum fields of energy, quantum fields of existence that's connected over to teleportation, connected to wormholes. That's why for a long time inside Q, the Storm Rider, I didn't talk about UFOs, aliens. I didn't talk about this because this subject is going to be huge of what you're going to experience, of what we're going to go into, of what's going to happen with USSF, with Musk, with SpaceX, with Trump's new financial system, and how the United States is going to become one of the most wealthiest countries in the world. And then that's going to lead a ripple effect to all of these countries to free themselves from the enslavement of a corrupt system that's run by the deep state, the cabal that creates forever wars, that runs the world drug trade, world weapon trade, the human trafficking trade, and all of the full corruption connected to the money laundering system and to the Ponzi schemes that keep the world's citizens inside enslavement society to where they're being lied to constantly and they're under control underneath taxes. These military operations with Trump and this super technology is going to free the world. Everything's going to change in the world what Trump is setting up. A huge ripple effect for the world to become wealthy together. But United States is going to be a spearhead. But right now we're inside of pain as a lot of stuff is going to happen in China, and that's going to affect Europe. It's going to affect the United States financial system. And then over what's happening with Mexico, the exposure of cartels working with people inside the United States banking systems. Tom Homan, Kash Patel, Bondi, they're going to go after this. The indictments have already been made. Now they're going to start making their first arrests. And that's what's going to trigger the deep state to try to create civil war inside the United States, set off some bombs. And that's why they're already testing a lot of operations connected to continuity of government inside of Washington, D.C., and a lot of places around the United States. And the military is already running secret operations along the West Coast to control cities. There's a lot of operations in play right now because the deep state is in panic as their full exposure through the world control systems that they have is falling apart. Their financial systems is falling apart and it's collapsing. And Musk with Doge has created a full gigantic panic effect. And Trump with Musk, they have stopped funding a lot of their operations. Now those operations is going to expose the NGOs through the countries, through the world that was funding the climate change, from the pandemic to the virus. A lot of stuff is going to be uncovered, and this is just going to grow massively as the Epstein files are going to come in, as the corruption of human trafficking through the whole world is going to come in. And Trump wants to ensure that the cartels fall apart inside of Mexico, inside of South America. And that's why Trump wants to have one of the presidents like Vicente Fox to be arrested, because what's going to happen in the United States with the continuity of government, or else Trump initiating the Insurrection Act. And when the military is initiated through the laws of wars 11.3, Trump wants to let the world know that they can never use cartels, they can never use these deep state forces to attack the United States again. And that's why Trump wants to make a huge, gigantic example. And he's looking at Vicente Fox for this because he was working with the CCP. There's a lot of things happening, people. But what's more important Very interesting. All my comms now are confirmed. Trump, the US government has confirmed they have technology that can manipulate space and time, and that's connected over to USSF, to operations I've been telling you about.